need to.
Okay.
Awesome. So everyone is in.
Okay.
And as people begin to file in, yeah, awesome.
Nice.
Great. All right, everyone, without further ado, I appreciate you all for showing up and taking time out of your busy schedules to join yet another Zoom at the end of your long days. I want to start by thanking CTA Higher Ed Equity Team, and specifically my colleague Fola Odembuni for inviting us to give this talk today. It's been a real honor to get this project going. And just want to give the title, and then I'm going to let myself and my co-presenters introduce themselves. My name is Ziza Delgado Noguera, and I'm an ethnic studies faculty member at Fullerton College. I'm also on the board of the California Community College Ethnic Studies Faculty Council, and I'm the founder and chair of the Racial Justice and Equity Committee, which is a part of our union in United Faculty.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Steven Estrada. I am Ethnic Studies faculty at Cypress College. I also currently serve as our division, the Social Science Division rep for United Faculty. I am on the United Faculty Negotiations team and a member of the Racial Justice and Equity Committee. I also thank you to Fola and her great guidance and mentorship, and a member of the CCA board. I am the director of District F2 and currently am the co-chair of the governance and the faculty and equity diversity committees.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Rose Gonzalez, faculty and chair of the Ethnic Studies Department at Fullerton College. I am also part of the RJEC committee with UF. I'm one of the co-founders of the Native American Faculty and Staff Alliance. And GLADE, which is our Queer Faculty and Staff Alliance, and some other things as well. Nice to see you all.
Hello, I am Daniel Joseph Lind. I am chair of the Ethnic Studies Department at Cypress College. I am the Social Science Division curriculum rep, and I am one of the core faculty members of the Cypress College Legacy Program.
All right, so we wanted to give a little context for today that our presentation is broken up into two parts. And the intention is that the first part really gives some background and context into what the field of ethnic studies is. For folks who are less familiar and who are trying to process, what does AB 1460 mean? What is ethnic studies? Many of our colleagues and people that we've experienced have had this question. And the second part of our talk today is about talking about how AB 1460 specifically impacts the California Community College system, but also its relationship to our work as union members. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Amber right now, who's going to take us into the next part of our presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We know that folks are joining this session from all over Indian country. I'm actually joining from Kumeyaay territory. And if you know where you're joining us from, feel free to drop that in the chat. If you're not sure, I'm actually going to share a resource that you can check out to find out what land that you're on. All right, so for our acknowledgement today, I'm going to speak to the land that our district, North Orange County Community College District, occupies, where the four of us live and work. Excuse me, NOCCD campuses are located on the unceded ancestral lands shared by the Gabrielino Tongva and Ahashiman Wanenyo nations, who have been the traditional caretakers of the land since time immemorial. We honor the Tongva and Ahashiman ancestors, and we want to lift up the resilience, strength, and survival of their descendants and relatives, past, present, and emerging. Tongva and Ahashiman peoples maintain a strong presence, living and working on and protecting their ancestral homelands and cultures, alongside people of other indigenous nations, Black folks, people of color, immigrants, and refugee communities who have made their home in Orange County. We honor all of our ancestors, and we invite them to join us today. And I want to share that a land acknowledgement is only a basic first step to get in right relationship with the Native communities whose land is occupied by our schools. It's our collective responsibility to actively work to redress the legacy of settler colonialism and support Indigenous communities' sovereignty. So that being said, we're going to drop in the chat some pages you can follow, groups you can support, and I want to direct you to specifically the first one, which is a GoFundMe page to protect Pavunga, which is the Tongva and Ahashiman sacred site of creation, which is currently occupied and threatened by Cal State Long Beach. So definitely check those out. Thank you so much.
All right. We're gonna have Amber also lead us in a grounding before we get started.
Awesome. Okay, so it's important that we get grounded so that way we can be fully present together. We are probably coming from meetings and class, work, family obligations. So it's important that we just sort of take a moment to become present together. And I understand the term grounded as an adjective, a state of being that takes ongoing practice. To be grounded is associated with an experience of clarity, wholeness, rightness, and harmony. To be present in your body, allowing you to feel centered and balanced. So first I want to just describe really briefly the process. So we're going to follow the image on the screen. You're going to take a breath in for 4 counts, hold it for 4, slowly release in through your nose, out through your mouth for 4 counts, and then hold it again. We're going to repeat that 4 times. Yes. To begin, I'd like for you to check in just with yourself, with your body. If you want to become aware of how you're sitting or standing, if you're able to, relax your jaw, rotate your head, loosen your neck. You can roll your shoulders back, maybe feel your spine and your sit bones. If you want to squeeze, if you're able to squeeze your hands and release the tension from them and place them in a comfortable position, maybe on your lap or on your desk. And then if you want to move your eyes down from your screen and soften your gaze, please do. You're welcome to close your eyes if you'd like, if you're comfortable doing so. Do whatever feels good and comfortable for you. Okay, so we're gonna actually wait for it to go around. So if you want to just maybe check in with your breath and find a normal, comfortable pace. We're going to breathe in through your nose. Hold, 3, 2, 1, and out of your mouth. Hold there, 2, 1. Breathe in, fill your lungs, and hold, 3, 2, 1. Breathe out, emptying your lungs, and hold, 3, 2, 1. And breathe in, and hold, and out, all the way out, and hold. Last time, a big cleansing breath in, and hold. And last big cleansing breath out. If you'd like, you can open your eyes, maybe refocus your gaze, and we're ready to begin. Thank you so much, gratitude.
Thank you, Amber, for that. Appreciate it. All right, so we want to start today by talking about AB 1460 and just kind of let you know a little bit of a roadmap of where we're going to go during our talk. It's important to understand that AB 1460 was a legislation that was passed that requires the Cal State University students to have an ethnic studies graduation requirement. My colleagues will go into much more detail of this later in our talk. But it also means that Cal States and California community colleges are going to be offering courses that meet this new requirement beginning fall 2021, which is just next semester. So the work has really already begun. We know that there are 2 pieces of legislation that are in the pipeline in the California Community College Academic Senate. That's 9.03, which is an ethnic studies graduation requirement, and 9.04, which is about strengthening general education requirements and really clarifying what ethnic studies is. And this is important for us to understand because this is all about alignment and understanding that this movement, this legislation doesn't just impact the Cal State system, but it impacts us at the community college level. We know that there is a massive and an ongoing struggle to expand ethnic studies in the K-12 system. And we also just want to start off by saying that ethnic studies is a unique, relevant, and significant discipline, and we'll be talking more about that during our time today. And we'll be ending our conversation by talking about the movement for ethnic studies in California, but also the work that we've been doing in our own district, North Orange County Community College District. So I'm going to use my time today to give some context about what our field is, because one of the things that we are blessed with as ethnic studies practitioners is to be very close to the people who founded our discipline. Many of us were mentored by them. They are still around. They are still advising us. They are still actively engaged in both AB 1460 and many of the other movements, whether it's at individual campuses or throughout the state. And so I wanted to share a little bit about the movement that helped create our field. And the most important things I want people to know is that ethnic studies was born out of social movements. And that social movement was about creating an empowering discipline for communities of color, but it was also connected to many other social movements that were taking place at the time, from the Black Panther Party to the American Indian movement to anti-colonial movements abroad. It was really deeply connected to the community. And as a result of that, it was also forged out of multiracial and ethnic organizing. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about how it also has a deep connection to labor and union solidarity. Ethnic studies was also student and community led. The movement, the Third World Liberation Front, and the other movements to create Black and ethnic studies have always been spearheaded by students and their community members, their family members, churches, local organizations. And that's something that is really deeply embedded in everything that we do. And it's because we very much pay homage to the fact that we would not be here today without the significant influence of our community members. Another part of our history that is relevant is that the movements to create ethnic studies on campuses throughout the country really faced a lot of violent repression by local campus state police, as well as resistance from traditional disciplines, administrators. And we mention that because it's important for people who are unfamiliar with the discipline to know that we have, from our inception, been having to deal with not being wanted in the institutions we are fighting to be a part of, fighting for our students, fighting for our histories, trying to work within these institutions, but also really knowing that they are legacies of violence and colonialism against our communities. So that history is important to share with folks. And then lastly, it's really important to understand that ethnic studies was guided by a clear call for self-determination, both within the universities to create our own research on our communities, engaged with our communities, that was about reducing harm and empowering our communities, but also self-determination for minoritized, historically marginalized, historically colonized people throughout society. The language of our movement that forged the creation of ethnic studies, which was the Third World Liberation Front, really came from the moment in which our discipline was born, which was 1968, 1969. And so the students were connecting themselves through their name, the Third World Liberation Front, to struggles for self-determination and anti-colonial struggles taking place all over the world. They were living through the most expansive decolonization and anti-colonial era in history. This picture here is from the 1955 Bandung Conference, where you had third world people, third world nations who had already been forging their independence and who were in the process of forging their independence, gathering for the first time without Western nations to really create and dream of a new world for people who had gained their independence. And that sentiment really resonated with people of color in the United States and across the world. And so that played into the language, to the strategies. Up here is a quote from the Third World Liberation Front at UC Berkeley, where it's actually talking about how the students were going to support Chevron oil refinery workers in Richmond, and the workers were coming to support the students on their campus. And so they were really connecting their struggle, their challenge, their struggle against capitalism, against other oppressive systems, and thinking about both the kind of multiracial, anti-capitalist kind of origins of suffering for many working class and people of color in this country. I also wanted to highlight this picture here by Emory Douglas. It's from the Black Panther parties. But this statement that Afro-American solidarity with oppressed people around the world was very much resonant with the Third World Liberation Front. And this is just a picture of some of the local union workers on strike at San Francisco State University. Lastly, when talking about the creation of our field, this is just the course catalog. And I think it's really telling because it's a reflection of what is important to some of our earliest ethnic studies departments, but it's also a reflection of the understanding that when you are working for decolonization within a colonial institution, just winning that space was not the end of the struggle. So you see on the very first page of the catalog, it says, under no circumstances should be assumed that our strike has ended. Our struggle for self-determination has just begun. And I think that really speaks to the fact that AB 1460, the movements in K-12 for ethnic studies, we understand this as part of an ongoing struggle for ethnic studies, because we also understand that ethnic studies, and now we have 50 years of research showing that ethnic studies does so much for students, socially, emotionally, academically. And so it's something that we want to advocate every student have access to. And then my last slide is just to talk a little bit about, what does it mean for us as ethnic studies practitioners? What is our area of expertise? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that just teaching about race or about gender or about sexuality or about power is the same as ethnic studies. And I want to acknowledge that that's something that our discipline really is we're one of only a few that really gets this kind of feedback. Very few other people think that they can just go teach biology or teach sociology, because we understand that there's a real expertise and training that happens there. So I want to share a little bit about the expertise and training that we get as practitioners. We're trained on understanding and examining the history of white settler colonialism, both as part of our history, but also how it continues to play out in our society and our communities. We examine the historical construction of race, white supremacy, institutional racism, how people navigate racism, and really significantly, the struggles for liberation that our communities have always fought. Because wherever there was oppression, there has always been resistance, and always joy, and always attempts to find that connection in our humanity. We provide a more complete and accurate understanding of US history to address the complexity of inequity today. And examples of that are, so much of colonialism was documented really well, but very little of it is taught in the traditional kind of disciplines and in the Eurocentric K-12 curriculum that we have in this country. So it's really important for us to dig deep into that so that people have a complete understanding of all of the histories that have made up the experiences of people in the United States. We explore the meaning of collective and communal identities that our people hold. We center the lived experiences and knowledge system of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And really importantly, we provoke action. We understand that everything that we learn has implications for how we live, how we connect with each other. I tell my students, no matter what your field or whatever your career path that you're choosing you go into, to have this background and to have this ability to be able to critically empathize, critically analyze, and understand the world that we live in is really important. And we are trained pedagogically how to center this kind of action in our teaching. And then lastly, like I said, ethnic studies is not, ethnic studies is a discipline. It's not just content that can be added to any course. It has a rich history, and it's been really committed to a political education. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Amber.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. So now I'm going to transition us into talking about ethnic studies pedagogies. And another way that ethnic studies differs from mainstream curriculum, as Lisa mentioned, is our pedagogy. There's a differentiation, not just in our content, but the ways that we share that content with our students, which is for a particular purpose. This is exemplified in many ways in a quote from Bell Hooks from her book, Teaching to Transgress. That's part of a trilogy. This book was published in 1994, and she says, "The classroom, with all its limitations, remains a location of possibility. In that field of possibility, we have the opportunity to labor for freedom, to demand of ourselves and our comrades an openness of mind and heart that allows us to face reality, even as we collectively imagine ways to move beyond boundaries, to transgress. This is education as the practice of freedom." And so in ethnic studies, we honor and center the embodied knowledges that our BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and students of color bring with them from their own lived experiences, as well as the knowledge they carry from their families and their ancestors. And as Aziza mentioned, we're committed to the interrogation of interlocking systems of oppression in order to unsettle and disrupt them. And one of the ways that we do this is by facilitating deep critical self-reflection, unpacking how these systems are felt, and the ways that they show up in our minds, bodies, emotions, spirits, in our very being. So we do a lot of introspective self-excavation. We offer our students the tools to interrogate what we've inherited in order to develop a keen awareness of the present and to engage in radical imaginings, the futures that we want now and for the next 7 generations. In the next 2 slides, I'm actually going to elaborate on these last 2 bullet points. The ways that ethnic studies is guided by Indigenous and decolonial traditions. And I offer one example of deep mentorship, collaboration, and building communities of care as one way to enact our freedom dreams. All right. So again, just to make a connection to what Ziza shared in her presentation, that ethnic studies emerged at the crossroads of multiple social movements of the 1960s and even further back into the 50s. The Black Panthers, Third World Liberation Front, and others were inspired by and drew connections to worldwide decolonial movements. And this decolonial and anti-colonial imperative has remained a strong thread in ethnic studies since its inception. And this is absolutely reflected in our pedagogy and not just in our content. And so ethnic studies is guided by these Indigenous and decolonial traditions that center respect and reflect 4 core values, which are relationship, responsibility, reciprocity, and redistribution. And relationships is understood as kinship. In the most profound sense, we understand that we are all related and that we are all interconnected. And this actually moves us beyond sort of the, I guess, mainstream rhetoric of allyship. Like, we understand that we are actually related. And so it's important to us to see each other in that way. Responsibility to community, which is really countering this very individualistic society that we live in. We are seeing the effects of this rampant individualism and this toxic individualism. And so we center community and that we have a duty to care for our relatives. Reciprocity is acknowledging that interconnectedness, our relationships and responsibilities shape our roles in life and are reciprocal, as is the nature of the universe. Very anti-capitalist perspective and way of being. Which leads to the 4th, which is redistribution. Generosity is valued and centered. Our reciprocal relationships and responsibilities guide us to share our resources and help us to maintain balance. Okay, so now that you understand a bit about these traditions, I want to give you an example of how these play out with our students. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce this video. This is one example of deep mentorship, collaboration, and building communities of care that reflects the indigenous and decolonial traditions of ethnic studies pedagogy. Beginning in 2014 as a public conference, the Ethnic Studies Summit has transformed into an on-campus student leadership retreat, empowerment seminar, and celebration of BIPOC creativity. Held annually in the spring semester, the summit showcases renowned speakers and performers, interactive workshops and presentations, film screenings, and has a resource fair and artisan marketplace. The event brings together students, scholar activists, organizers, artists, and local community to explore a different theme each year. The intentions of the summit are to share and generate knowledge and inspire action by theorizing and strategizing, skill sharing, discussing practices for responding to ending all forms of oppression, and to engage in communal healing to create a more just society. The summit is organized by a team consisting of students, myself, and ethnic studies faculty. And so this is a promo video from the 2016 summit that was created by a student, and this will give you a sense of what the summits are all about.
The time has come, the walrus said. Perhaps things will become worse and then better. Perhaps there's a small god up in heaven readying herself for us. Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. Maybe many of us won't be here to greet her, but on a quiet day, if I listen very carefully, I can hear her breathing. Thank you.
The annual PILAS Summit, which stands for People's Intervention for Liberation, Autonomy, and Self-Determination, to bring educators, activists, artists, scholars, community members together to talk about the issues that are important to us.
You've got to have a confrontation in that community.
Salud y revolución, so health and revolution, and really thinking about what are the ways that we can heal from things like racism and oppression and being pushed out of our high schools and being discriminated against, and all of these things that we face on a daily basis. How do we heal from those things, and then how do we make sense of it in order to keep moving forward? Skill sharing, sharing our stories, speaking our truth, these stories that we hold on to, and we don't get a space to express them and release them and process them. So that's what the summit's all about. How do we help others to heal, and then how do we create a better world?
I choose to reflect the times and the situations in which I find myself. That to me is my duty. And at this crucial time in our lives, when everything is so desperate, when every day is a matter of survival, I don't think you can help but be involved. Young people, black and white, know this. That's why they're so involved in politics. We will shape and mold this country, or it will not be molded and shaped at all anymore. So I don't think you have a choice. How can you be an artist and not reflect the times? That to me is the definition of an artist.
All right, thank you. That's all for my part. I'm gonna transition on to Danny, who's gonna share the importance of how do we get this content and this pedagogy to more students.
Okay, all right. So one of the big questions is, what is AB 1460? And this was legislation passed by the state just this past summer that basically requires at the Cal States to offer lower division courses in ethnic studies beginning in fall 2021. And one of the questions that was asked, why is it lower division? And it was decided that when students are taking upper division coursework, they're focusing on their major requirements. And so they basically kept it at lower division with other GE areas to basically give the students the opportunity to take these classes in ethnic studies before they get deep into their major. And second point is that the requirement begins with students graduating 2024-25. So starting this coming year, freshmen coming this fall will be having to take this requirement. The AB 1460, it does not alter the existing associate degree for transfer and major requirements. So in other words, it's not an extra 3 units. It still falls within the same 60 units that students need to take to transfer to a Cal State. And the way it's working is that it's the Cal State's created a brand new Area F in terms of distribution requirement. So as of right now, it's area A through E. They added area F that focuses specifically on ethnic studies. And the courses that are to be approved for area F are ethnic studies courses only. So courses that are offered by ethnic studies departments. That includes African American, Black, Africana, Pan-African studies, Asian American, Pacific Islander studies, Chicano, Latino, La Raza studies, and Native American, American Indian studies, and those of us who have ethnic studies departments. And it was also decided, this is also very key, that in order for a course to be approved for area F, the course needs to have a prefix from one of these departments. The only way the courses that are not in ethnic studies departments can meet area F is if it's cross-listed with an ethnic studies department or ethnic studies field. Okay, next slide. So in terms of what are the core competencies of what ethnic studies is, I think Amber and Ziza kind of tied into this in terms of what are the core competencies that make up what ethnic studies is. And so if you look at number one, analyze and articulate concepts such as race and racism, racialization, ethnicity, equity, ethnocentrism, Eurocentrism, white supremacy, self-determination, liberation, decolonization, sovereignty, imperialism, settler colonial, and anti-racism as analyzed in one or more of the following areas of ethnic studies: Native American studies, African American studies, Asian Americans, Latino American studies. So in other words, looking at these concepts in terms of how they specifically impacted certain communities of color. Secondly, apply theory and knowledge produced by Native American, African American, Asian American, and or Latino communities to describe critical events, histories, cultures, intellectual traditions, contributions, lived experiences, and social struggles of those groups with a particular emphasis on agency and group affirmation. This is the one thing that in ethnic studies we always focus on, is how these communities have agency, how these communities created history, how these communities created literature. And so you're giving voice to these various ethnic communities. Thirdly, critically analyze the intersection of race and racism as they relate to class, gender, sexuality, religion, spirituality, national origin, immigration status, ability, tribal citizenship, sovereignty, language, and or age in Native American, African American, Asian American, and Latino communities. In other words, you're looking at race and racism, but you're also looking at race and ethnicity along with class and gender and sexuality and religion. Fourth, critically review how struggle, resistance, racial and social justice, solidarity, and liberation as experienced and enacted by Native Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans, and or Latinos are relevant to current and structural issues such as communal, national, international, and transnational politics, as for example, in immigration, reparations, settler colonialism, multiculturalism, and language policies. Ziza addressed this earlier, that these various groups of color launched their own social movements for change. And so what this is saying is that ethnic studies focuses on how these groups did launch their own movements to bring about change for their own communities and for society as a whole. And lastly, describe and actively engage with anti-racist and anti-colonial issues and the practices and movements in Native American, African American, Asian American, and Latino communities and a just and equitable society. Again, what have these groups contributed to trying to bring about social change in American society? Okay. Next slide, thank you. Now, big question always gets asked is, well, what qualifies one to be an ethnic studies practitioner? According to the state, okay, the state basically broke it down. And right now there are 3 areas of ethnic studies that the state has approved that one can have expertise in. So for one who wants to teach in African American studies or department in African American studies, you need to have a master's degree in African American, Black, or Africana studies, or a bachelor's degree in African American, Black, Africana studies, and a master's degree in ethnic studies or the equivalent. So it's very clear now that the focus is on Black studies and ethnic studies. For Chicanx studies, master's degree in Chicano studies, ethnic studies, or the equivalent. Okay, so it's again ties to what Jesus was talking about. That this is a discipline, and the state is making it very clear that you have to have training in the discipline in order to teach in the field. And in ethnic studies, you'd have a master's degree in ethnic studies or a master's degree in one of the different ethnic studies areas. American studies, ethnicity, Latino studies, La Raza studies, Central American, Latin American, cross-cultural, race, ethnic relations, Asian American studies, African American studies, or the equivalent. Again, grounding it in the discipline. Okay, next slide. Big question that always is getting raised now, because some schools have social justice requirements. I know it's Cypress, so we're going to talk about that in a minute. We have the social justice, equity, and sustainability requirement. Fullerton has multicultural. And the big question is, what is the difference between multicultural studies, the social justice studies, and ethnic studies? While there's overlap, there is a difference. If you look at what multicultural studies and social justice studies focus on, one, it focuses on broadening the struggles for equity, justice, and to all marginalized communities globally. So you're not just focusing on race and ethnicity, but you're looking at various underrepresented peoples or various struggles such as gender, sexuality, age, religion. Secondly, the curriculum integrates information about communities of color. In other words, it doesn't focus specifically on communities of color, it integrates it into the curriculum. Thirdly, it focuses on multiple perspectives and identities, diversity and inclusion efforts. Again, it's not always grounded in communities of color, but it focuses on multiple identities and diversity and inclusion broadly. Fourthly, it focuses on tolerance, right? Tolerance, acceptance, affirmation. And lastly, the pedagogy focuses on identity, experience, social mobility, how groups have various groups, not just communities of color, but all groups were able to upwardly become mobile and focusing on role model. So that's what multicultural studies, social justice studies focus on. Whereas ethnic studies, as you can see, there's a difference. First of all, ethnic studies focuses on the historical and contemporary experiences of racialized communities. So the focus of the curriculum, the focus on the course is on the historical experiences, of the historical and contemporary experiences of racialized communities of color. Secondly, the curriculum centers on the epistemology of Native and people of color communities. What have been their philosophies in terms of bringing about social change? How are they able to articulate their philosophies to bring about change in their communities? Third, race and intersectionality of identity, resistance, and self-determination movements. So you're looking at race and ethnicity at the core, along with looking at identity, resistance, self-determination. Fourth, the focus is on anti-racism, decolonization, ethnic solidarity, how groups came together, right, to bring about change in their communities. And lastly, in terms of pedagogy, the focus is not just on identity, but identity politics. It's focusing on power, oppression, right? Basically looking at white supremacy, how power and oppression, how these tactics have been used to oppress racialized communities, social movements, and agents of social change, how various communities of color became agents and bring about change for their communities in the past as well as for the future. Next slide, thank you. And in terms of the big issue with regards to community college and CSU alignment, earlier I said that various community colleges already have requirements in place. So Cypress, we have the social justice, equity, and sustainability requirement, and Fullerton has the multicultural graduation requirement. And the big question that gets raised is, should California community colleges replace their local graduation requirement with an ethnic studies requirement? Those of us in NOCCCD ethnic studies, we do not believe that you should replace ethnic studies with, replace social justice studies or multicultural with ethnic studies, because one, not all of our students attend CSU, some attend UC, and some are planning just to get an AA degree and to go into the workforce. And so we feel that ethnic studies and social justice studies and multicultural studies can work alongside each other. One does not have to replace the other. We can have both. And then when it comes to the issue of cross-listing with non-ethnic studies departments, the position that was recently taken by the California Community College Ethnic Studies Council is that schools that don't have in place robust ethnic studies departments may want to cross-list courses in order to meet the legislation, right? So they're not found to be out of compliance. Whereas the institutions that do have ethnic studies departments in place, it was basically strongly suggested that we don't cross-list, because those institutions that have robust ethnic studies departments and programs already have the classes in place to serve our students to meet area F. Okay, and that's my portion. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Stephen Estrada.
All right, so I've been basically asked to kind of highlight the recent developments and the work across NOCCD and what has been going on with faculty within our district, right? So what I really want to do is kind of focus on three areas. And one is Black Faculty and Staff Association kind of leading the way with the creation of their Black Lives Matter Task Force and a report of recommendations that they gave out first to Cypress College as a campus, but then this kind of spread out across the district. The second is kind of the responses that UF, United Faculty, our full-time local union has had, and that was mainly, responding by creating the Racial Justice and Equity Committee, and then obviously, addressing the ways in which the Ethnic Studies faculty, which you have 4 of us here in this presentation right now, and the work that we've been doing around AB 1460 and responding to these things. So if I can please get the next slide. Okay, so here's a quote coming straight out of the Black Lives Matter Task Force report, right? And again, here is a group of faculty and staff coming together in the summer of 2020, right, as a response to the social movement, to the tragedy that we experience collectively in the nation, the national conversations, and obviously the ongoing issues of inequities and within education. So, they put together 6 subcommittees. One is focused on the legacy program here at Cypress campus. They also wanted to address college, district, and community relations. They wanted to address language and compliance and policy issues, as well as curriculum issues, funding for Black students and resources for Black faculty and staff, as well as issues of hiring, reclassification, and promotions. But really what they're doing is essentially committing to addressing deep historical issues and deep traumas of white supremacy as a result of white supremacy and the institutionalization of white supremacy, of which, of course, NOCCD is not outside of that realm, right? And this report becomes really a self-reflective and intentional commitment that Black faculty and staff put together to push towards racial and social justice. And so, I mean, of course, there's a whole lot that comes into this report, but I want to kind of focus on what is relevant here in our discussion. So if I can get the next slide, please. Of course, I think one of the main things that is important here is the recommendations the task force put forth in terms of curriculum. They were looking at really pushing for an audit of all of our classes, of all our SLOs, right? In order to ensure a more accurate and equitable incorporation of the histories and the experiences of Black people and people of color. In all lessons, in all our survey history courses, in any kind of course that is talking about significant social or political movements or contributions of folks within the US, and also in the study of creative works. They also wanted that all courses that focus in some way on race and ethnicity, that they be offered. They wanted to make sure that these courses continue to be offered. And so they made recommendations that all courses that have a focus on race or ethnicity be offered at least once an academic year, if not once a semester. They wanted to ensure that these courses be offered regularly in the summer offerings, and to encourage the deans and administrators to allow courses that may have low enrollment, right, to continue to enroll and run those classes in order to build up, right, the clientele and the enrollment for these classes. Basically to ensure that these classes are going to be ran, because there had been a long-standing history, at least I know at our campus, of kind of saying, well, we don't have the clientele for these students. We don't have enough folks enrolling in these classes, and then kind of waiting and just basically having these classes in the books, but not offering them regularly. They also wanted basically to recommend that counselors strongly recommend that students seeking to attain an ADT or a degree take these courses, right? Because that has been historically another issue, right? Not really funneling students or informing students of the value of these types of courses. And with some foresight here, this report that came out basically finalized right at the beginning of the fall semester in 2020, they made a recommendation that there should be a local ethnic studies requirement for all degree seeking and transfer seeking students, right? They, of course, the conversation about AB 1460 was already underway, but with foresight, they made this kind of local recommendation or push for a local recommendation. So, you know, curriculum being a focus here, but they also were very much aware of, you know, who would be needed to kind of make sure and ensure that these recommendations would take place. And so they made recommendations for campus and district leadership, but as well as our union. And so I want to make sure that I highlight that the task force recommended that the union be called in and to collaborate on ensuring these recommendations, not just in curriculum, but in issues regarding hiring and tenure review practices, issues related to maintaining and ensuring culturally relevant and responsive curriculum and pedagogies across the district, and also to ensure that there is continued efforts and maintaining of anti-racist training and professional development. Right, along with, of course, as unions would need to do, to look at recommendations for proper compensation, right, of faculty of color. So if I can get the next slide, please. You know, so in essence, right, the Black Lives Matter Task Force is recommending curriculum audits. It's increasing, pushing for an increase in race and ethnicity curriculum and the development of, and offerings of these types of courses. And again, a call to action to our union, right? And the union responded, right? We have our valiant leader and union president here today. Thank you, Christy, who calls in our great chair for the Racial Justice and Equity Committee, Ziza, and essentially formed this committee, right? I mean, very strategically choosing folks who have been who have already showed commitment to this type of work across the district, right? And you can see the purpose of the Racial Justice and Equity Committee is to ensure that our union has dedicated body that represents the interests of the most historically marginalized faculty in all union efforts moving forward, right? And what we see here is this very, in a very short period of time, a lot of action being done by our union members and the RJEC committee. Right, we chose very early on, again, to be very strategic in the composition of this committee. The committee has members that were part of the Black Lives Matter Task Force in the committee. The committee has 3 out of the 5 full-time faculty members within that committee. And so you can see this relationship already from the very start of this committee. Now, some of the relevant kind of goals or mission of RJEC was to conduct research on the unique needs and experiences of faculty of color and of students of color, right? To develop policies to address the harm imposed upon folks and to improve the working conditions, right? And retention and recruitment of marginalized faculty, which is again important as we develop our programs to meet this new demand for ethnic studies. And to advocate for compensation, again, of faculty of color who are doing the necessary, but also additional labor in mentoring, in advocacy, right, in educating students of color in the district. So really looking at that faculty that are supporting minoritized students. Another key part here is, you know, the composition, again, of folks. So all of these efforts here by BFSA and by RJEC the whole time are also involving the ethnic studies faculty, because this is the work that we've been doing across the campus already. And if I can please get the next slide. Our ethnic studies faculty has been, since the beginning of the fall, meeting together, working collaboratively to figure out how we address these issues, right? It started with an invitation from the Fullerton faculty to go and speak to the curriculum committee at Fullerton. And we were asked to go there and to address these issues. They were questioning whether or not to proceed with changing their multicultural curriculum requirement to mirror that of Cypress College, right? And we recommended that they hold off because we were still waiting to see what was going on with AB 1460. Luckily, we have Ziza, who was asked to be part of the council. And so really early on, we had messaging coming straight from the source, right? This statewide council of ethnic studies faculty. And everybody here on this panel has joined those efforts, has gone to both of those summit meetings. And you can see here a description of kind of the things that were of major focus in the first summit and will continue to be as the council does the work of figuring out how to implement this statewide, right? And again, all of these points here are ways in which faculty at NOCCD have been working towards these efforts at the local level, but also engaged in those conversations statewide, okay? Overlooking the historical importance and definition of ethnic studies. This will be extremely important in the upcoming Senate spring plenary, right? And of course, at our local level, the issue of cross-listing has become a major source of contention, but it's not going to be the last issue that we face, right? We're going to be asking for more faculty. We're going to be asking for more resources and funding and budgets in our department. So we know we have, some struggles to get people on board and to understand what this development means. And so we are working proactively and reaching out to folks across the district and on our campuses to ensure that this happens in a very collegial, but also disciplined, protective way, right? If I can get the next slide, please. I think that the highlight of our work is in our most recent memorandum that we sent to our VPIs at both districts, our curriculum chairs, our Senate presidents, our counseling deans, and our own deans in our departments, in our divisions, I mean. And this is a statement that we shared with them to let them know that we will not be participating in cross-listing processes, right? We are going to maintain the integrity of the field and the discipline. And we have the privilege of having really long-standing and robust ethnic studies departments. And so we are making a clear point to stand our ground here, right? To be able to determine the courses and meet this requirement, but we're opening up avenues for collaboration, right? We are willing to work with folks in developing their courses to add more emphasis on race and ethnicity. We are willing to work with folks to increase our program maps and allow for other courses within our degrees. We are willing to promote other classes that have interplay and overlap with our courses. So there is a way in which we can work, but we are standing strong on this issue of cross-listing. And I think what this really shows is, the faculty here, and I don't mean to pat all ourselves on the back too much, but what we've done is really engaged in the type of work and embodied what we teach in our curriculum, and we advocate for our students, right? Not only on our campuses and within our own departments, but also in our efforts within the union and within the statewide council. So, I just want to leave us there for my portion with this, what I think is a great move in a good direction to establish a solid foundation moving forward for us.
Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate you and everyone. I want to come back to one thing before we finish off and go into the questions section, and that is just I want to offer the California Community College Ethnic Studies Faculty Council, and Jonathan, if you can put that link into the chat again for folks, it's actually our email. We're working on finalizing our website, which will be live soon. And the reason I want to just put this resource up again for people is that I know that there may be administrators, deans, people trying to figure out, curriculum folks who are trying to figure out what all this means additionally outside of what we've talked about today. And so please feel free to reach out to this body. I know sometimes there can be things, sometimes when we're speaking to our own communities, there's a lot of stuff there, and sometimes it's helpful to have an outsider group's perspective and advice. And so I hope that people will use that resource, which is this body of the CCCES Faculty Council. And so with that, we have some citations for folks who are interested. We can share those if people want to have them. But I really want to end by thanking all of the amazing CTA and CCA folks who have made this event possible. We thank you all for your commitment, your interest, and giving us the space to talk today. Also, our amazing technical support from Jonathan and Brenda, who've made helping us get everything going. Again, without the collaboration in the community, this wouldn't have been possible. So with that, I want to open up Q&A for the people. I'm going to stop my screen share so I can see you all. And all right, let's see. Yeah, so if folks have questions, you can type them into the chat. Or you can raise your hand. Try to keep an eye on everybody. We really want people to ask their questions that they have now. Hopefully you have some inquiries, comments, any kind of feedback would be really useful and appreciated. All right, I saw Dwayne first. Schaefer.
Thank you. First of all, I want to applaud you, North Orange County. You all are doing it, and it's just great to see it all synthesized here. And so I just want to say congratulations. Thank you for being the trailblazers in this, because we do have work to do, no doubt about it. But what I want to put in this space is that I just want to let you know that the CSU are really working with the teacher prep programs in developing a line for ethnic studies. Matter of fact, they want to move it from liberal studies for the multiple subject to ethnic studies with the liberal subject option and stuff. And so there's a lot of movement happening there, also because our K-12 educators are looking for how do they get this training, how do they get a, certification or whatever. I know that's a bigger, piece, but there's still some concerns with that. So there's a lot that's happening. And even at my campus, Long Beach City College, they're hiring their first ethnic studies teacher to develop a program. Now that's a far cry at Long Beach. I was just like, what? And nobody had to burn anything down. But anyway, so I just want to put that in the room, is that there's work happening everywhere. I know CFA is not with us as far as the union is concerned. However, those individuals are still connecting with us in the CCA realm. So we're still partnering. Just because we're not union brothers and sisters in the real line sense does not mean that we're not working together. So I just want to put that in the room. And I have a lot of stuff I'm just going to lift from y'all and share over there at Long Beach.
Yes.
So that's it for me, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments. We appreciate it. And yes, there's so much work that we have to do across, our different places in the system of education in this country. And we're really excited to do that. And I think it's a really important moment. Did anybody else want to comment on that for the panel, Steve, or anybody? Good.
No, I completely agree, and I appreciate it, Dwayne.
Amber?
Yeah, so speaking of trailblazing, so we have been thinking on our campus at Fullerton and are in the works of developing a certificate for ethnic studies educators for folks who want some certification and some training in terms of. We're really looking forward to what the state does in terms of K through 12 teaching as well.
Definitely. I see Julius has a hand up. Thomas?
Hi, I put a couple of questions in the chat. First of all, I want to talk about the presentation. I think the presentation is phenomenal and long overdue. We have long sought and needed to seek in the community colleges ethnic studies as a viable means for our students to get educated and to get better understanding of who we are as people of color. That's number one. Number two, and Stephen will know this as well as some of the CCA board members that might be on the board, there's something sitting in my craw that I just can't let go. And one of the things is this coming spring at the CCA conference, there's probably going to be a vote about whether or not we should replace the ethnic minority seat, which is one seat on the board, with a seat of something called the diversity seat. It's my opinion that we need both, that we need an ethnic minority seat as well as a diversity seat, and that we don't replace one with another, which is what you said in this presentation earlier as I was listening. I was a good student in school. So I want to put that out in the chat and make sure I put that out in the room because most of you are CCA members, so I want to invite you to come to the spring conference and please vote that we can have both seats as opposed to replacing one seat with the other. And I want to make sure that was known. So thank you for his presentation. And if anybody has anything they want to say to me, I'm here. So thanks.
Thank you for that, Julius. Amber?
Yeah, if I could just respond to that. Thank you so much for calling that up, Julius. I think that is, I know that within ethnic studies, that is one of the core tenets, which is to move away from binary thinking and to disrupt binary thinking that is so ingrained in our being. And that's one of the things that we unpack with our students and how this shows up all the time for folks, right? It's this either or thinking and not both and. And if we think about the ways that capitalism affects us individually and on a daily basis, it's also thinking from a scarcity mindset, that there isn't enough to go around for everybody, that there isn't enough to share, right? But if we step back and think about how BIPOC epistemologies and worldviews help us see the world differently, it's about, right, giving and sharing and both and so I just wanted to thank you for calling that up.
I also wanted to comment on that. Thank you, Amber. That what is like these conversations, like, should we replace our multicultural requirements with an ethnic studies requirement? No, we need more. We need more of these requirements. So it is not a one or the other, because the traditional disciplines and English and all of the work that these that history and sociology has done to include more classes that are more focused on race and power dynamics, those are important because we need students in those disciplines to take classes from their disciplines on these topics. And they also should be taking ethnic studies classes on this. And so we're really encouraging us to move away from that, to say that more is better. I don't think anybody looking around and being in the world today can say students should only have one class that analyzes power and race and all of these things. So that's what your comment really brought up for me, Julius. Thank you. Jonathan had Steve.
I just wanted to follow up on that. And I think that this is, just because I've had 2 days now straight, Danny and I having these conversations on our campus with leadership. And that is another reason to not cross-list. Because then if you cross-list, you don't provide the incentive of these other departments and programs of really doing the work of bringing that content, right, and that pedagogical approach into their own field, right, within their own disciplines. And I think so that I think this is really important, and I'm glad you brought that up.
And also, I want to share a strategy that we've been doing. We've had meetings with a number of traditional disciplines recently, and when advising them on how to support the growth of their courses in these areas that will not meet Area F, but that will be useful for their students and maybe graduation requirements locally, is that we're encouraging them to pay people with expertise, people of color with expertise. Don't ask them to do the work for free. We're meeting with them initially to give them some advice, but we're not doing the work for them. We're guiding them to people who they can compensate to do this work, who are experts in this area. And the response has been positive so far. And I think, we're telling them that there's funds available. So there's lots of ways to engage your colleagues who may come to you and ask you to do this work respectfully and collegially, but also, as union members, we're very focused on making sure people are compensated for their labor. And even outside of union members, that's important to all of our work, like Amber has talked about. So those are just a couple strategies that we've been practicing, and it's gone really well so far for us. All right, Jonathan, I want to get to your question.
Yes, so we've been using the chat for questions, but we've also been using like an anonymous website for questions. And a question that came from that is, in the minimum qualifications for faculty and administrators in California community colleges, Native American studies is not a minimum qualification for ethnic studies. Is there an effort to change this?
Amber, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so I think this is part of the conversation that we're going to be having. There's a discipline input group on Friday statewide for ethnic studies to talk about creating a transfer model curriculum for ethnic studies and to move away from the social justice studies requirement, or understand, I guess, what the differences would be, and to develop course identification numbers for ethnic studies courses, because right now they're identified as social justice courses. And part of that conversation is to think about, well, who is also qualified, right, to teach these courses. And I know that's one concern that I also have, is there isn't a minimum quals for Asian Pacific Islander or for Native American studies, which are their own standalone subfields. So as far as I know, it is on the radar. These, I don't know if there's any conversations at the statewide council, but in the 2 summits, I know that was one of the topics in the breakout groups. So folks are aware of it. I just don't necessarily have an update on like next steps to get that established.
I think this will also be addressed in the spring plenary for the statewide Senate. When they really kind of formalize and finalize those 2 resolutions, right? Because this is part of that work as well. So I think we'll see developments in that as we move forward.
Thank you.
And I know part of those discussions in the part of the discussions in the statewide summit too is to think about if the minimum qualifications as they're currently written actually are what they should be. Because as those of us who are ethnic studies practitioners know, that Latin American studies is actually its own field, and it is not ethnic studies, right?
Cross-cultural studies.
Cross-cultural studies.
These are cross-cultural studies.
Not ethnic studies, right? So there are issues, I would say, that also need to be worked out with the existing minimum qualifications.
Definitely second that. Yeah, I think there are conversations happening about that. I don't also have a specific update, but if you email the website for the California Community College Ethnic Studies Faculty Council and want to be added to their contact list, you can get regular updates about things that are going on at the statewide level. So I would recommend that to the person who asked that question. Jonathan, was there another question that came up? Did anybody else have questions, comments? We really want to invite also comments about the Racial Justice and Equity Committee that we've created. If folks are interested or have questions about, that work, we encourage, other people to create similar programs. It's been really empowering. And for many of us who are on a million committees and in meetings all day, it's often a space that has really been a breath of fresh air. And just, it's been really exciting to focus on union work with that particular lens. So we definitely encourage other folks, if people want to reach out, I have an email that I'll put in the chat for everybody. You can reach out to me and I'm happy to chat with you about developing anything on that. Yes, Fola.
I just, first of all, you guys were awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so proud of you all. I just want to quickly plug the fact that we have a Equity and Human Rights Conference, CTA Equity and Human Rights Conference starting on the 25th. And a similar segment just on ethnic studies will be coming up, I think on the 25th. Already from inside information, we don't have many people signed up to go because the session is scheduled parallel with several other sessions that are competing. So I would say that please let the word go out and please attend, register for the conference and attend the session on ethnic studies. You're gonna get more and you have more opportunity to ask questions. We need this. We need this to uplift our higher ed people and know that they can have a voice. So we need your participation at this upcoming CTA Equity and Human Rights Conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Fola, for that reminder. And if there are no other questions, I just want to offer one more opportunity. We're good. All right. Thank you so much to the co-presenters, to the whole team who made this possible, and for everybody who attended. We really appreciated sharing space with you all and look forward to being in touch.
Special thanks to our student CTA, Jonathan and Brenda. Awesome.
Yes.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I dropped in the chat a Google form. We would really appreciate it at the Higher Education Equity team. If you could fill that out, we'll get a little bit more information about those who attended, but also if you have any suggestions and also anything you would like to see from us in future events. So please fill that out. The link is in the chat.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, Brenda. All right, everyone, have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Special shout out to my students who I see on the screen. Yay.
Yeah, mine too. Holler.